You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 159. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Eva Lesko Natiello, who is the award-winning author of the New York Times and USA Today bestseller, The Memory Box. She lives in New Jersey with her family, and her latest book, Following You, was published in February. I enjoyed chatting with Eva on her creative process and the unique way that she gets ideas for her suspenseful psychological thrillers and a whole lot more, so stay tuned for that interview coming up here in just a moment. A quick reminder, though, if you're enjoying this podcast, please do rate and review it on your favorite app. If you go over to thrillingreads.com/rate, you can find easy links of the different places where you can go and rate and review this, like over on Apple Podcasts, for example. You can also sign up to the Thrilling Reads mailing list from that page. I only email a couple times a month, but I email with great deals on mystery and thriller books. So you can go check all that out at thrillingreads.com/rate. All right, here is my interview with Eva Lesko Natiello. So I'm happy to have Eva here on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Did I butcher your name? I always forget to ask before hitting the record button.
Wow, it was so beautiful. I have to say, you did not get tripped up by Natiello, and I have to tell you, I have heard it many, many different ways.
Oh, good. Yeah, with the double L in Spanish, so you kind of want to go to Natiello.
Yeah, but you still used a really nice, I don't know, it was kind of lyrical the way you said it, but thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm glad I didn't butcher it. So
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, please?
Yeah, sure. I started writing thrillers, I'd say about 10 or so years ago. And it wasn't something that I always I wasn't born and said to myself as a infant, I need to be a novelist someday. I'm not one of those authors. I really never planned on writing. It kind of happened so a little bit out of the blue, I have to say. And it's kind of an interesting story. I was in my past life. So right before I started writing, I was in the cosmetics industry, and I was a PR and marketing director for Estee Lauder and some of the brands, Estee Lauder brands. And that was really fun. I did that for a long time. And actually, I even worked with the namesake, Estee Lauder, the woman who launched the brand in the 1950s. She was a marketing genius, and I learned so much from her that when I launched my first book called The Memory Box, I actually used several of her ideas, her marketing strategies. I modernized them for, 2020 or whenever it was that I launched that book. And, marketing is one of those things, like you market a book and it doesn't really change all that much. I mean, the strategies, the how you go about it does, but the principles don't. But anyway, I learned so much from her and from that career in cosmetics that could not have prepared me better to be an author, a storyteller, market my books. So I did that for a while. Before that, I was actually a singer, and that usually throws people for a loop. I worked in the Caribbean, and I was a singer for resorts in the Caribbean. So that was pretty fun too. So I'm not sure when you asked me what's your background, you were planning all of that or anticipating that.
No, that's fascinating, especially I saw that from your background, your marketing and PR background, because that's something that a lot of authors struggle with. They're like, oh, I just want to write. But unless you're got a huge deal, you're still going to, even with a big deal, you're still going to have to market and promote yourself. So did you find so it's interesting to hear that you were able to apply what you learned in your other job to your writing world?
Yeah, completely. And also, I think what happened was when I started writing, I realized I now do something professionally that incorporates everything I love to do, which is great, which was creating the art, but also marketing. Because I really do. I am a marketing geek, I have to say. love thinking about that. I can't, every time I meet an author and and I say, well, what do you write? And what's the name of your book or whatever it is, we get into a talk, my marketing wheels just start going crazy. Like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? So I can't separate one from the other. And I'm really happy that, because the creative side is what I favor. I love the writing part, or the storytelling, as I like to think of myself as a storyteller and a writer of things that are, pretty shocking. I mean, thriller writing, you're shocking people and you've got the twists and the turns. And, I remember studying with someone years ago about writing, and she was saying to me, or to all of us, all the students, if you think you know what the reader is expecting, give them the opposite. And that is such a great thing to keep in the back of your mind, especially when you're writing thrillers,
Yeah, that's a great mantra for thriller writers. And were you a fan of the genre as a reader, or what drew you to write in that genre?
Yeah, I like psychological thrillers. I know this is going to sound a little strange. I might have mentioned this to you before, but I don't like being scared. I am sort of a chicken, if you must know. And I cannot watch like scary movies, cannot watch them. I have terrible nightmares. So when I read, I guess I like fiction, and I like magical realism, and I like historical fiction, and I like psych thrillers, but I don't normally like to be scared. But why do I gravitate to writing thrillers? That will be most likely your next question. I would say. I do love the idea, and I think all of my books definitely touch on misconceptions. And I love the idea of misconceptions and how everyone, no matter who you are, and almost every day, there are things that you meet in life which are misconceptions. I love misconceptions and I love facades, and where something appears to be one way, but it is completely another. And facades, obviously can take the shape of so many different things. Not only is it can it be a person, someone who appears one way, but they're maybe, have another agenda, or they're hiding something. But even in my books, sometimes the town, so this setting for Following You, my newest, takes place in Southern California. And it's really based on like a San Diego. It's not called San Diego, but that's what I had in mind, fictional version. And most people, when they think of San Diego, you think of this amazingly beautiful community. I mean, with the beach and the, coast and the palm trees and the flowers. And what about it hovers around 70 degrees year round and sunny, but something is amiss there. Something's going on. And the thriller takes place in this really beautiful location. So again, the city and the town is a facade for something darker going on. So I do like that kind of thing. I did a lot of theater as a young person. And so I love the theatrics of thrillers, giving people what they don't expect. That's fun.
Yeah, especially the psychological thrillers, and they're so popular now with all the girl psychological thrillers, Gone Girl, Girl on the Train.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So that was a good timing for you, market wise, with your publishing psychological thrillers.
Yes.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about the story of Following You? What's it about?
Yeah, sure. So the protagonist is a celebrity. She's a woman who's really kind of popular for being a TV host, a very popular and beloved TV host of a shopping channel. And it's based on the shopping channel QVC. In the book, it's called iShop. And this very popular host who's quite successful, she had a stalker, and at the beginning of the book, we discover that her stalker has been found and there's no threat anymore. And so she can live her best life now. And so in one of the earliest chapters, she decides to go to this New Year's Eve party. She's really psyched. The New Year is looking promising. This stalker's been discovered, and she's going to go back to her normal life. And she hops in her car, and she's following a colleague from the studio, from the iShop studios, to this open house New Year's Eve party. And she does something really stupid, as will happen in a thriller. Somebody is about to do something dumb and you're screaming at the book, don't do it. But her decision to do something dumb comes out of her being really panicked. She gets into a situation driving behind this car who she thinks she's driving behind this little silver car of the cameraman that she works for. And so she does something really dumb, and she goes missing. And so the rest of the book is touches upon these three strangers whose lives intersect after this woman goes missing. And the book is told from the three different points of view, and we find out how they're interrelated and if she gets found in the end. And that inciting scene, the one where she's in the car, actually did happen to me. And that's where I got the idea from. I was following somebody in a car to a party, and I don't really know anything about cars, if you must know the truth. I have no idea, like one type of car. I just know colors. And I just knew I was following a little silver car. That's all I knew. And I knew that we were going to be driving for like 10 to 15 minutes before we got to the party. And 15 minutes went by, 20 minutes went by. I'm going through detours. It was a rainy night. I was stopped at a red light, and the car I was following got past the red light. And so it's 20 minutes later, it's 25 minutes later, and I'm thinking to myself, wait, what is going on? This party was supposed to be 10 minutes away. Where the heck are we going? And that's when I realized the silver car I'm following is not the one I started following.
Wow.
And that's what happens to Shay, the protagonist. She starts off following a little silver car and a couple of detours and a turn that she wasn't supposed to take later. And I mean, you never realize how many silver cars are on the road. I mean, practically everyone's got one, by the way. So that's part of the problem. And she ends up following the wrong car.
Wow, love that. That's very, that's incredible. That's a great hook.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And she ends up, and of course, she's going to a party that's open house. You know, you just walk in. It's this big party on the coast in San Diego, and she walks into the house. But if she's following the wrong car, I got news for you about the house. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Without the spoilers, I can see where it's going. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. And then I love how you get your ideas, because I was reading when I was reading your bio, preparing for this interview, I saw that you had a Vice article written by Caroline Thompson, who was the name of one of your characters from your first book, The Memory Box. Yes. Can you tell us a little about that and how you got that idea for that book? Because I think that's so cool as well.
Oh my gosh, that is a funny story. So, okay, I'm going to start answering your question just by explaining first what the first book's about, so that you get how unbelievable this story is. So The Memory Box is a story about a woman who Googles her name and discovers a past she has no recollection of. And she's discovering things about herself in a Google search she doesn't know about. Now, that book came to me from, so that was the first book I wrote. And that, before I started writing that book, I had no intentions of writing a novel, as I discussed before. But a couple of things happened where I, moved out of New York City and had, had my second child. And so we moved to the suburbs in New Jersey, and I took a leave of absence from my work at Estee Lauder. And I was missing having that creative outlet. My job was really creative, and I really did love it. And one day I read an article in the New York Times about people Googling themselves. Now, so this article was written a long time ago, 10 years ago or 11 years ago, when people started doing this, okay? And one of the people in the article was a 17-year-old high school boy who lived in California. He Googled his name. First thing he found missing persons, that he was on a missing persons list in another country. So he was on a missing persons list in California. And he was so shocked by this, he didn't know who to turn to and who to discuss this discovery with. Of course, he wasn't going to go to his mother because now he's questioning whether she is truly his mother. And it turns out that he was kidnapped when he was 2 from Canada. He was taken to California and he was raised there. And he had a really lovely childhood, except for the fact that he was lied to and taken from Canada. So I'm reading this article and I'm thinking, that is the craziest story I ever read. How could you Google your name? I mean, most of us know pretty much everything there is to know about ourselves, right? One would think, right?
Yeah, especially something like that, especially about your parents.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine Googling your name and finding out things you don't know about yourself. And I just thought, what a great idea that would be for a thriller. I had no intentions of being the person to write that book at the time, but what started happening was I got not amnesia. I got insomnia. I could not sleep at night. And the idea for this character, I thought it would be great if it was like a mom of young children, sort of the life I was living at the time, and set in this great community. Again, the town as a facade, where this woman Googles her name, and then she's so afraid to share this with any of the other people in the community. And there is a group of women, moms in this community, who are digging up dirt. I mean, they Google people just to try and dig up dirt on people. And so she Googles her name and she only sees 3 things. And it's all kind of, philanthropic, what she did for the public library, what she did for the kindergarten kids, blah, blah, blah. And she's so relieved. She thinks to herself, thank goodness these women are not going to be gossiping about me because they're going to find absolutely nothing. And then a few days go by and she thinks to herself, that's all there was about me on Google? How embarrassing. In a way, she feels really like nothing. She must be nothing's going on for this woman. So she Googles her maiden name, just kind of on a lark. Nobody knows her maiden name in this town. And that's when she starts to discover these crazy, crazy things. And at first she's like, no, this must be another Caroline Thompson. It can't be me. And the further she looks, she realizes it is her. And now she's got to prove that these things are wrong before anyone else proves that they're true. And so that's the crux of that book. And it's a really fast-paced, rabbit hole that you go down. And that's told from her point of view, first person. And you really do feel like you're losing your mind along with her along the way. But so this is the funniest thing that happened. The protagonist's name is Caroline Thompson, and she's the one who Googles her name to see what she can come up with. Well, one day, I guess it was about 2 years after the book was published, maybe 3 years after the book was published, I went to the dentist. I was reading my emails before I was called into the dentist's office. And just that morning, I was working on a new book and I was thinking about names. And I started thinking about Caroline. Now, I hadn't thought about that character in years, right? Because once you finish a book, you're not really consumed by them anymore. And I started thinking about Caroline and her name and her maiden name, just for kind of trying to figure out this new character's name. After the dentist appointment, I'm looking at my emails at my phone in the car, and I have an email from Caroline Thompson, and I nearly freaked out. I screamed. First of all, I screamed. I was like, what the heck is this? How could my character be emailing me? I mean, I was so flipped out. I can't even tell you. It was the strangest thing ever because I had just thought about her that morning. And I don't know a soul named Caroline Thompson. I don't know one person except for my character. So right now I'm shaking in my car. I'm shaking, thinking it's my character. And she knew I was thinking about her. But of course, I know that can't be true, right? Lest you think I'm crazy. So I click open the email, and it's a journalist from Vice magazine, and her name is Caroline Thompson. And the reason she found me is because she Googled her name, and she found something that said Caroline Thompson Googles her name and discovers the shocking details of a past she doesn't remember. And she screamed.
That's very meta, and you both freaked each other out.
Oh, totally. It was like full circle. It was the most perfect thing that could have happened, right? It was the most perfect thing.
Yeah, and then your book, and then you got to write up on Vice. So nice little plug for the book.
Totally. It was awesome. It was really awesome.
Yeah, you can't buy that kind of publicity from a big magazine like Vice.
No, you can't. It was just amazing. And just like, even as a PR and a marketing person, I mean, I should have thought of something like that, and to orchestrate at least, but I mean, I didn't have to in the end because this woman found me. And she was really kind of a pip, like she was so paranoid. She's a very paranoid person, and you'll have to read the article. It's really fun.
Yeah, I'll definitely have a link on it if people listen to this on the website, and we'll because I read the article, and it's fascinating how she got all freaked out about it, and then you got freaked out. And I'm also curious to know about your writing process too, because you come up with these great ideas, so like you're following the wrong silver car. Yeah. So from that point in time that idea pops in your head, what's your process like then? Do you like start like thinking that I'm going to write about this? Do you outline it? What's your writing process like?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I do think of these kind of disparate scenes, that car event that happened, and then the reason why I even got on like the QVC thing, I remember watching QVC many years ago and thinking, wow, this is like a subculture of people who are, I mean, the viewers are so dedicated and so loyal, and they think they're really best friends with the hosts. And it's just kind of funny, this whole relationship that the viewers have with the hosts, and it's very intimate and it's a little weird. And you could see how people could be borderline stalkers, and not even know they're stalking someone because it's almost set up for that kind of thing. It's weird. So I had these different events in my mind. And what I do sometimes is like that car thing. I knew that if I had walked into the wrong house, right, or the character has to walk into the wrong house, I start back engineering the story, like, whose house is it, and why is it bad that she walked in there? What's going to happen? Who is this person she walked in on? Does she walk in on something? And then how does she go missing? And the story takes on from there. And I sometimes know the end, like the end, the beginning and the end. And then I often are like back engineering, like I just said, how do we get to that end scene? And it's not really until I sit down to write, do I have a handle on the characters? I'm definitely not a planner or a plotzer or what did I say that right? Plotter. Yeah. Yeah, that was wrong. So I do fly by the seat of I don't think I'm supposed to say that either. I'm mixing metaphors now, but I don't plan. I don't outline. I'll outline when a decent chunk of the book is written. So like I'm writing a new one now, and I would say 60 to 70% is done. So I'm actually going to outline now because I know the crux of the story and I know most of the characters, but maybe at this point, what I need to do is make sure I have the right characters, doing the right things, and also enough of the red herrings. That's kind of fun to sprinkle those red herrings in there, and so that the thriller reader who loves to be manipulated, I shall do that to them.
I like that. And what do you use to write your books? Do you use Word or some other software program, or?
So I use a combination of Word and Pages because I work on a Mac. I've been thinking about switching over to Scrivener, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm kind of a disorganized person, so maybe I should do that. But for now, and I do a lot of writing on paper, pen and paper. I do a lot of that because I do a lot of great writing when I'm not in my office, when I'm at a place that you would think nothing's getting done. But I do find that I work out real trouble spots. Like if I'm having a hard time figuring out a scene or a character, sometimes I'll sit in my car, which is outside, like in my driveway. I'll just go there and sit there, close the door, bring a pad and a pen, or I'll pretend I'm sleeping on a couch. I'll just, lie to myself and it will just, I think it's about just not having distractions, letting the mind be completely clear of distractions and any other thoughts. And that's why this whole like pretend you're sleeping thing, I close my eyes and I could pretty much work out any problem I'm having in a very, very short amount of time if I shut my eyes, lie down and shut my eyes, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's usually like usually when going to bed, all the ideas start coming in.
Yeah, totally. I'll never forget when my kids were young. This was kind of funny. I remember being, in our family room. I was lying on the couch and my daughter had a friend over and they walked through the family room and her friends whispered to her and said, "Your mom is sleeping." And my daughter looked at me and said, "Oh no, she's just writing."
So they knew already.
Yeah. She's just writing. So that was cute.
Yeah. And now I'm curious too. I've been asking my guests now because of the crazy year that we've had with the pandemic and COVID. Did that have any changes into your writing process, and how are you planning to address it? Are you going to ignore it? Are you addressing it in your future books?
You mean COVID itself?
Yeah. Like I know some writers are like, no, alternate universe, it didn't exist, and others are like, well, I'm going to start addressing it because I write in the present.
Well, the book I'm working on right now does take place during COVID, the very beginnings of the pandemic. So early last spring. This idea, I didn't really want to write about COVID, but this idea presented itself to me. And I thought it was fun, really fun and interesting enough that I shouldn't ignore it. It doesn't play a huge part, but it's creates a backdrop and also an obstacle for this family who for many generations for several generations they've owned a regional theater out in the Hamptons, New York. And these three sisters, their parents were big Broadway stars and opened up this regional theater out of a barn. They gutted a barn and created a theater there, and it became a really popular theater. And then when they died, they left the theater to the three sisters. And so one of the sisters has tragically died right before the book starts. And the sister that always was afraid that the theater was going to be her responsibility someday. She never really wanted the theater to be her responsibility. And it was the other sister who died, who was really the genius behind the theater. And she was the creative director. She has died. And so this surviving sister has to make sure that the theater doesn't go under on her watch. But then all of a sudden what happens, and they're planning a very big production of something, but then COVID strikes and they have to shut the theater. And she's really afraid that she will lose the theater because they're in financial ruins. And so she has to devise an experimental production, an experimental theatrical production that they do during COVID that allows them to still employ and turn a profit. And it's during this opening night of this experimental production, which half of the cast of which is the ticket holders. So the audience combined with the actors are in this experimental production. And on opening night, a crime is unwittingly uncovered.
That sounds like fascinating. Where are you at with that now? Is that going to come out next year? Or?
Yeah, that's the one I'm in like this outline stage for. So I'm pretty close to the end. The hard parts, I think, are done. So I think the fun will start happening now. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, in your books, since they're psychological thrillers, they're standalones. They're not part of a series.
Yeah, they're standalones. Even though everyone keeps telling me I'm supposed to be writing series.
Well, but not usually. From what I've seen for psychological thrillers, those seem to break the norm that they're standalones, and those have been uberly successful. So.
Yeah, well, from your lips to God's ears, Alan.
Yeah. I always like to ask my guests about advice because I have aspiring writers listening to this podcast. And I know that I saw from your website that you actually offer coaching for authors. So this is perfect for you. What kind of advice do you have for an aspiring writer?
Well, the first thing I tell aspiring writers is act before you think. The reason I say that is because people who've never written before think about it for the longest time. They think about what they should write, how they should write it, when should they write it? They don't have time to write it. They shouldn't write it because they're not really a writer. Every excuse under the sun, right? But what I find is if you act before you think, so just take out a pen, be online at the grocery store, write it on the back of, an envelope you got in the mail and start writing, because you can't edit what you haven't written, right? You can't. And the hardest part is filling up the blank page. Just start. And the other thing I always like to say is start at the scene that excites you the most. Like, don't worry about where does the story begin, but I don't know where it's going. All that thinking, that will derail you for the rest of your life, seriously. And I remember meeting this memoirist. Well, he would laugh if he heard me calling him that because he hadn't actually written his memoir yet. But he said to me, I just don't know where to start the story. And I said, well, it doesn't really matter. What's the most exciting scene in your mind right now? What's the one you can't wait to get to? Forget about where it starts. Start there. Because it doesn't have to end up being the first chapter in the final book. You'll write around it. You'll write in front of it. You'll write in back of it. Or maybe it will be the beginning. Who knows? But because writing, and you know this, Alan, you have to sit with a project for how long? Sometimes, at the very least, months of your life, and it could be years of your life. And so you have to be enthusiastic about that project for a long time. And you will inevitably go up and down in your emotions towards this project. So what's the best way to ensure you make it to the end is staying excited. And you can stay excited if you start excited. If you don't start excited and you start with, oh, maybe I should tell that story about when I was 5, that'll lead into the exciting part. Don't do that. Start writing in the exciting part, get super stoked about your book, feel proud, feel good about yourself that you started, and hopefully that will be exactly what you need to get you going and keep you there until you finish it.
And so what's a great place for the listeners to find you? What's your website?
My website is my name, EvaLeskoNatiello.com, and they can sign up for my newsletter on that site, which is really fun. Once a month, I send out a newsletter that has lots of good, funny little stories and lots of good stuff. So I'm on social. People can find me on social, and the books are available pretty much anywhere you buy books.
All right, great. So then Following You, that's your latest, and that's out now. So yeah, people go check that out. It's been a lot of fun talking with you, Eva, about your process and your books. It's been a lot of fun.
Same here, Alan. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It was great chatting with you, and I wish you much continued success.
No, thank you. Likewise. Thank you for listening to Meet the Thriller Author. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with one of your favorite writers of mysteries and thrillers, or if this episode's guest is new to you, I hope you give their books a chance. Helping listeners discover new authors and books is one of the coolest outcomes of doing this podcast. As always, you can head over to thrillerauthors.com to sign up to my Thrilling Reads email list. That way you won't miss out on any great deals in thriller and mystery books. You can also check out all the links and resources in the show notes for this episode over at thrillerauthors.com. And also, please do subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already, and leave a rating and review wherever it is that you're listening to this show. If you have done that already, I thank you. I really do appreciate your support. For my other links to my author website, social media haunts, and more, check out thrillingreads.com/links. All my links will be on that page. So that's it for this episode. See you next time, and stay safe out there.